Hi everyone, this is Jim. Welcome to this postmortem of my Blitz game number 592. I had white pieces and kicked off with c4, and my opponent plays e5, going for a reverse Sicilian setup against my English defense. I could play with knight c3 here, or g3 as I played. Both moves have kind of the same idea. You often will play both of those moves. The bishop here on this diagonal will control the light squares, and the knight will help with that. And my opponent plays a very rare response here, f5. Well, you can see it's not completely unheard of, but the knight moves, knight f6 and knight c6 are the more common responses here. So f5 is a reverse Grand Prix attack, and I could continue as I would with colors reversed with d4. It looks like that's a playable move. Although what's different is there's also this extra move here, g3, which wouldn't have been played in the reverse scenario, so it's not clear if that's helping or not. So it makes sense just to continue with bishop g2, and this leads to a decent position for white. He goes with knight f6 and knight c3, and after knight c6, if he were to play knight c6 here, we get back into a pretty typical kind of position. Also d6 could be played here, and both these would be pretty common and reasonable ways to play. This bishop c5 move is actually a mistake. The bishop is a target here, and I can gain a tempo on it. And I've seen this position with the colors reversed a lot. This seems to be popular at the club level, at least, or in Blitz, to bring this bishop out and go for a quick attack on f2. So you block the attack with this move e3, put the e-pawn there, so there's no attack on f2, and it prepares d4 to kick the bishop and gain some time. So black castled here. I developed my knight. And then black played c6 here. Actually, the chess engine wants black to immediately, right here, move the bishop back to e7. It thinks that's actually the best move for black in this position, which clearly indicates that the bishop on c5 there is a mistake. Anyway, he plays c6, a more reasonable way to play from a human perspective. I go with d4, gain that tempo, and the bishop does drop back to e7. So I castle, and he plays d6. So black is slightly worse here. He's a little underdeveloped. He has less space in the center, and there's some avenues to attack against his king. I continue with kind of typical queenside play here. I've got this bishop looking at the light squares, and I start pushing my b-pawn forward to start taking advantage of that. And black, even though he's slightly worse, is not in big trouble yet, but he starts going downhill with the next couple moves. He plays h6. I push on with b5, but then he ignores what I'm doing over here and just pushes on with g5. And this really is just too weakening. And in fact, the chess engine wants me to immediately strike back with the move h4. Notice that after I play h4, he can't push this pawn forward because I will snag the h-pawn, the pawn on h6. So this way I can open up some lines towards his king, which is all exposed, and his queenside pieces are just not participating in the game. They're not even off their original squares. So that's the best way to continue. But this is also okay. I play pawn takes, he takes back, and then once again probably pushing with the h-pawn is a good idea here. But while I develop my bishop, he goes bishop a6, kind of asking me, this sort of begs for the move queen a4, which turns out to be a good move. It's hitting the bishop and it's hitting the pawn. And once again, black chooses to ignore these various threats. Now the knight is defending the bishop, but the pawn is definitely under-defended. And but instead of pausing to defend, he just pushes on. Oh, he moves his king off the back rank. Maybe he's a little worried about stuff happening on the light square diagonal. So anyway, I go ahead and grab the pawn here, and when he takes back with the knight, I have a choice of which piece I can take, because the knight was defending the bishop, but when it took back, it had to give that job up. And I chose to take the bishop, which I think is a good choice. This way, my opponent doesn't get the advantage of the bishop pair, and I just have the better position here, more space and more active pieces. He tries to harass my queen with knight b4. I drop back. He defends his knight. And now I drop my knight in with knight to b5. Now the chess engine wants me to immediately kick this knight with pawn to a3. And I eventually play that, but not for many moves. But it'd be good to play it right here, actually. The one point is that the knight on this square is actually controlling c2 and prevents my queen from going to c2, which would be a good diagonal looking out on the king side. So that's the value of that move, a3. And that's something I didn't think of during the game. After knight b5, instead of pushing on with f4, he has this idea of pinning my pawn with queen d7, pinning my knight with queen to d7, and that would be, you know, playable for black, although still with a pretty big advantage to white. Anyway, he pushed on with f4, and this is probably just losing at this point. So I take the pawn, and his idea is to push on with g4 and maybe attack with the h and the g pawns. So I play knight g3, not only to blockade the pawn, but also to look out at these squares on the king side. He pushed on with h5, that's defended by his knight, but I can drop into f5 here, hit the king, and he decides to move his king to h7. And right here, once again, would be a great time to play this move a3, because after the knight moves, my queen can come to c2, and it's now extra powerful on that diagonal because it's been opened up. When black pushed all those pawns forward, he opened up yet another diagonal towards his king, and he placed his king right there on that diagonal behind my knight. So that would threaten some very dangerous discoveries. Instead, I traded off this bishop. It still keeps a winning edge, but just not the most accurate play, and drop my queen down this way. My idea is to route my queen around this way to the same diagonal, avoiding that c2 square, but it's actually quicker to kick the knight first, because that move comes with tempo, and then just go directly to c2. So this is a slow plan. When there was a faster plan available. He drops his knight into e4, and now finally, with the threat of two knights hopping into my position and threatening all kinds of forks that I would have to constantly defend, I finally decide to chase the knight away. I guess the reason I left it there for so long was I wasn't sure it was doing all that much that was useful to black. But in the postmortem, I realized that control of the c2 square by that knight was actually very important, and it was doing a useful job. So that's why I should have just chased it away earlier. So now he goes to c6, and I get my queen on this good diagonal. The king just unpins immediately, and I bring my rook into the game. So all this keeps a significant edge to white. It's just that it would have been a quicker, a more convincing win if I'd played differently. And right here is another opportunity to improve. Another idea is to open up another diagonal towards his king by pushing the pawn forward to d5. And actually I play that in a move or two, but right here would be a good time to play it. When I push this pawn forward, it opens up the square on d4 for actually three different pieces. The knight could use it to reroute to different squares. The bishop could use it to check the king, or the queen could use it. So, and it also comes with tempo because it kicks the knight. So that would be a very useful move to play right here. Instead, I try rerouting my bishop around this way, also taking a look at the pawn over here and taking advantage of the pin. The knight can't move because of the pin. But he finds a way around this. He first pushes the pawn forward, and when I play d5, finally realizing the value of this move, he drops his knight back to d8, and I play knight to c3. That was my idea, is to bring the knight over here and try and take advantage of this pin. He manages to escape with knight to c5, kicking my queen. And now right here there's one, I have to move the queen because both queens are under attack, but I will lose the exchange if I take his queen, because or even the whole rook, because his knight can take my queen. It's unprotected. So there's different squares I could move it to, but the most active and the most accurate one is to bring it out here to g6. And then actually the engine gives the best move as queen f7, coming over here to chase my queen away, but that leaves the d pawn hanging, and after I grab that pawn, black's position just falls apart with these two passed pawns, two connected passed pawns. They just turn into real monsters here. So that would have been the best way to go. Let's back up to the game. I played queen to c2, just staying on this good diagonal and getting away from his knight. The queen goes over to f7, getting away from my rook. Trade one pair of rooks and place the bishop back to e3. So now I'm trying to maneuver this bishop onto a good diagonal. If I can get my pieces on both of these diagonals, his king is going to be pretty exposed here. Knight b3 is played, which controls the d4 square. I go in with knight b5, thinking maybe to come in here and trade that knight off, or perhaps to take this pawn. But actually, I had a simpler answer here. I could have just grabbed the pawn on a4, which undermines this knight. That would have been pretty good right here. Anyway, knight b5 is what was played. He goes queen to f6, trying to maintain defense of that diagonal, but that's a pretty dangerous move. As we see, the lineup of the queen and the king is just asking for tactics. See, I play, cancel out, I play rook d1 here. I'm still trying to get a piece on the d4 square. He goes knight to f7, so now I can do it. I get my knight to d4, and if he trades it off, then I'll get my bishop here, and that will be really good. So he tried knight to c5, but I popped my knight into e6, and you know, he could just repeat here, and I would have to find a different plan, but he decided to grab the pawn, which is sort of what I was hoping. He takes, and now I can grab here. Let's see. Oh, he grabs a pawn, and now I get to play bishop to d4. So this is clearly winning at this point. Finally, I'm going to be up material because he doesn't want to give up the queen. He has to block somehow this diagonal, and he has to give up a piece to do it. So I come out a piece ahead, and we play on a few more moves. Let's see. He takes back with a pawn to force my bishop to move, and plays h4, trying to continue with his kingside attack. I go rook d7, threatening mates along the back rank here, and he pushes with e4 to block that. And now I can just put the bishop here. And so he resigned at this point. He has to give up more material. And, you know, he could try rook d4. The chess engine likes the move. Instead of just taking the rook and being a rook up, the chess engine likes this move, threatening mate here and also keeping this pin intact. And with the queen and the rook no longer coordinating on the third rank, he can't bring the rook over here to block my queen. So this is deadly too. Anyway, at this point, he just resigned after the move bishop to d4. So, interesting game. Hope you guys enjoyed this. Leave any comments you have in the section below, and I will see you again soon. Bye.